Yeah, I'm 22.
Oh, all right. That's part of your story.
Yes.
All right. This is a story about Kelly, 22. And what is Kelly's story?
And
It's a very emotional story. What is it emotional about? Take your time. What are you feeling?
what was that?
What are you feeling?
It's overwhelming. It's really exciting that.
Are you feeling love within yourself?
Yes.
All right.
And I'm starting to realize.
That you deserve it?
Yes.
Oh, all right. That's a nice story.
For a long time, I felt empty and sad and.
Yes. You told yourself a very empty story for a long time. But now you are telling a very fulfilling story.
Yes. And
Yes.
part of it is as I'm growing and I'm starting to learn a lot.
Yes. Which is what growing is all about.
Yes. A lot of it is memories that I'm trying to
Not trying.
that I'm remembering.
Yes.
And I just
That
wanted
have to do with what?
with myself as a young girl,
Yes.
because I feel a lot of things I blocked out, and I started to forget who I was, and
All right.
because it was painful to think about it.
All right. But now you understand that you can invent yourself at every moment as a new person. Yes?
Yes.
And as you do so, the things that you're calling past memories actually have no longer any relevance for you because you're not that person anymore. Literally. They literally have nothing to do with you anymore if you choose to define yourself that way. Do you understand this concept?
Yes, Bashar.
All right.
And every day
Yes.
I remember I spend time by myself, remembering myself as a child. Now that I'm now that I'm accepting and trying to get rid of those blocks. And
It's not about trying to get rid of the blocks. It's about investigating the belief systems that you've bought into and identifying those beliefs so that you can recognize that the beliefs that are out of alignment with your truth don't belong to you and you can let them go. You may have simply been given them by parents, by friends, by society, but once you identify them as someone else's beliefs, you will understand they don't belong to you and you can let them go because you don't want to carry what doesn't belong to you. You understand?
Yes.
So let them go if they don't belong to you. Because once you understand they don't belong to you, they have no more effect on you. Because effect is only what you choose to be affected by. And if you have beliefs that are unconscious, you feel the effect because you're not aware of what the belief is. But once you know what the belief is, once you identify it, it no longer has an effect because you can recognize you no longer prefer it to have an effect. You're no longer choosing it to have an effect. And so it no longer does. Identification of the beliefs is key.
Thank you. And one more is, as I'm remembering these memories of myself as a kid, a lot of them, they are exciting and I feel really happy when I think about it, but then in the end, I feel, at the end of that realization, I feel sad because it's gone. And
Because it's what? You feel sad because it's what?
It's not gone. I know.
It will never go away. Remember that growth is the process of inclusion, not exclusion. You will always be aware of that as a possible experience, but you can understand you don't have to choose to buy into that experience as having anything to do with the you you're defining yourself to be now. Do you understand the difference?
Yes.
If you truly are a different person, if you truly define yourself as a new person, then linearly speaking, from a space-time perspective, if you truly have defined yourself as a new person, then wouldn't you as a new person have a different past than the person that was there a moment ago?
Could you repeat that one more time?
Yes, I can. And for the first time, if you truly understand that you're defining yourself as a new person and understand clearly that when you do redefine yourself as a new person, that this is not just a metaphorical idea, that you literally are a new person, then linearly speaking, from your space-time perspective, every different person has a different history. So if you really are defining yourself as a different person than you used to be, then you have a different past. You have a different childhood. Define the childhood that belongs to the person you're defining yourself to be now as a young adult. You can define the childhood now. You create the past from the present, not the other way around. The past does not define the present unless you choose to create that illusion. But you're creating that illusion from the present because you only exist in the present. So any so-called past that you're remembering, you're actually creating the relationship to that idea now from the person you're defining yourself to be. So if you define yourself differently, you can actually know you've created a different past, a different relationship. So define the child you'd prefer to be, or in your language, define the childhood you would prefer to have had that is relevant for the person you're defining yourself to be now, and recognize that the so-called memories of the childhood you don't prefer belong to another woman. They don't belong to you. It's her childhood, not yours. Not yours, literally not yours. It's not about ignoring it. It's not about covering it up. It's about acknowledging it as the stepping stone that you were able to use to define who it is you prefer to be. And in so doing, the childhood she had helped you become the person you are that has a different childhood. That's the paradox. Is this making sense?
Yes.
So you, whoever you are now, never had that childhood, even though you can still be aware of those so-called memories, but those so-called experiences belong to her, not you. She's in another reality now. You're not her any longer. Literally. I don't care what you think you still look like in the mirror. That's just an illusion of continuity. You're actually a different person, literally, because person is an artificial construct. Personality is just composed of beliefs and emotions and thoughts and behaviors. It's a mask that the consciousness wears to have a physical experience. It's just part of the ego structure mask. Personality, when you change anything about your beliefs or your feelings or your behaviors or your thoughts, you actually change the person, literally, that you are. Even though you think you look the same, you're actually not the same person. You just look similar to her. That's all. Similar, because you're creating the sense of similarity. But in fact, as many people on your planet have already experienced, when you change yourself enough, when you know you've changed yourself enough, you can actually look so different, because you really are a different person, that some of your quote-unquote friends may actually not recognize you. Who are you? Oh, I didn't recognize. Why do you look so different? Because I am. I am a different person. Now, you have maintained a connection with those people in a manner. You've co-created a reality together with those friends so that you're interacting with a version in your reality, a version of those friends that contains the ability to recognize the difference. Were you to simply not need that experience, then you would simply be capable of changing enough. I'm just talking about a possibility here. You would be capable of changing your appearance to match the differences within you enough so that any of the people that the old person used to call friends would actually literally not recognize you when you walk by and wouldn't even say you look different. They just wouldn't know who you were. But you don't necessarily want to create that much detachment, so you maintain the idea of the version of them that will recognize the difference, but will also show you that you really have changed. You can use the friends as a reflective mirror in that way to prove to yourself you really are a different person by having them reflect to you that they almost didn't recognize you.
Yes.
You understand?
Yes.
But you really are a different person. Literally. Take me literally. This is not a metaphor.
Yes.
It's not an analogy. Everything you change, every time you change, changes everything, literally. You are in an entirely different parallel reality as an entirely different person, if that's how you choose to define yourself to be. And you can know that whoever was here a moment ago, whoever she was, wish her well, bless her, give her unconditional love. But those memories of childhood are hers. They're not yours. Does that help you?
Yes. And one more thing.
Yes.
Part of my story.
Yes.
In my dream state,
Yes.
I have a reoccurring dream.
Yes. How exciting.
And
Do share. Yes. Do you need a hug?
I'm at the ocean and
Do
I'm,
you need a hug?
yes. I don't.
Somebody give her a hug. No, there is nothing to apologize for. This is the process of discovering your beliefs. You see, you have been bold enough and strong enough to choose an event, an experience called experiencing a lot of emotionality so that I may recognize through these emotions what I believe to be true. Very bold, very strong, very exciting story. I'm on the edge of my seat. And so is the channel's body.
Okay. Thank
And
you.
so this reoccurring story is what?
I'm at the beach.
Yes.
And I see this tidal wave.
Yes.
And it's coming.
Yes. Yes.
And I usually it varies.
Yes.
Sometimes I feel really scared and I paralyze.
Yes.
But then the wave lands on me.
Yes.
And I just float with it. Like I feel like I'm gonna
Yes.
get hurt or something. But I go along into the wave.
And what happened then?
And then I wake up.
And then what happened? Don't you hear that a lot in stories? And then what happened?
Yes.
How exciting.
And
You
I'm
understand the symbology archetypally for yourself?
That's what I'm trying to understand, because sometimes
Water represents emotion. You said you're overwhelmed by your emotional feelings, the tidal wave. But if you go with the flow, you're all right. Your emotions can't smash you if you go with the flow. You won't be overwhelmed if you go with the flow. You'll be fine.
Thank you.
That's the story of the tidal wave. Does that help you?
Yes.
Then pleasant dreams to you in your new story.
Thank you, Bashar.
My, what a loud story.
Hey, Bashar.
And to you, good day. What is your story?
First, I have a story of gratitude to
All
you
right.
and your family.
Our story of gratitude to you as well.
Thank you. In my story, I know I've chosen the theme of soul awakening.
Well, that's true of many of you, actually.
Yeah, well, yeah,
But
I
your
recognize that.
version of it is your story.
Yes.
All right.
And many
Congratulations.
other versions are here.
Yes, congratulations on such an exciting story choice. Soul awakening. How does it go? How does this story go for you?
Well, I'm still expressing gratitude. It's still a story of gratitude
Oh, all right. Thank
to
you.
finding within myself, because I know you are within myself,
Yes.
a great mentor and a true friend.
As you are to us. Remember, you're mentors to us as well.
Yes.
And so?
I've also attracted myself in this story
Yes.
to information about whom we on this earth call masters.
Yes.
Not masters of limitation. Well, yeah, they would be masters of limitation because they have mastered themselves and limitation.
All right. Yes.
They talk about Neptune and
Are you referring to the idea of the planet in your system or the archetypal God form?
well, I'm not exactly sure, but they say Neptune.
Yes.
Taking this on as much as I understand it,
Yes.
they talk about a civilization who composes the root race to humanity and whose teachings they now live by.
All right, but you understand there are no other indigenous physical life forms such as your civilization physically on any planets in your system.
Not physically, right.
They are talking about the idea of the connection of non-physical consciousness beings to different archetypal planets in your system.
Right.
Because the resonant vibration of those beings simply matches the resonant vibration of those planets as you have laid your system out archetypally.
Right.
All right.
So
they identify with them in that way.
right.
All right,
And their teachings.
All right, and so how does that archetypal story serve you? Why have you attracted yourself to this?
Because I want to live that story.
Which is, in a nutshell, in 25 words or less, pitch it to us. What's that story?
The story of mastery over self, mastery over limitation, to become a being who also projects and represents the world's spirit.
It is not mastery over self. It is mastery of self.
Oh, right. Because it includes, right?
Yes. And you don't lose yourself. You will always be what you consider to be you, no matter how high you go.
No. I had no intention to convey the thought that I would lose myself because I must retain my essence.
We are just more clearly delineating the definition that goes with the idea called mastery over self.
Yeah.
That implies within the definition that you lose the self. That's why mastery of self is more of an appropriate way to define it, because then it's all inclusive and you don't lose the self-identity.
This and that.
Yes, this and that, not this or that, this and that.
Okay. As far as the identifying with those teachings,
yes.
And I know I can use my own synchronicity to attract them, but
you always do.
Yes.
And so?
Could you throw me a bone?
A thigh bone? An arm bone? What kind of a bone?
A bone of information.
About what?
About these teachings.
But you haven't shared your story about it yet. How does it resonate for you? So that we can throw you the bone that resonates to your particular interpretation of the story. Mm-hmm. Put it out there and you'll get something back.
Well, I'm living my story.
Pitch us the story that attracts you. Why are you attracted to this particular resonant story?
Because it represents my ultimate beauty as a being experiencing physical reality.
But what are the specifics of this story that do that for you? What are you specifically resonating to in terms of the structure of this story? What are the elements in the story?
To become a being that expresses compassion and is removed from suffering.
Removed? You mean you're not choosing to suffer?
Right.
All right, well then don't choose to suffer.
Anyway.
Do you want the story to be more complicated than that?
No.
All right. Well, I've just thrown you a bone. Don't choose to suffer. Don't choose to identify any experience you have as suffering. And you won't experience it that way. Can it be that simple?
Of course.
Does that help you?
Yes.
Does that answer your question?
Well, I wanted to know if there are any physicalized information about these teachings that they have represented in the story.
Are you looking for a permission slip?
Yeah.
A physical permission slip? Well, hasn't your imagination come up with something that's a physicalized representation of these teachings?
Not that I have currently.
Well, why don't you use your imagination to do so if that's what you want? Maybe you don't need one.
Are you talking about the idea of creating them?
If you want to create a physicalized version or a physicalized representation of this particular permission slip of energy, you have the imagination to do so. If you haven't invented what you're asking for, maybe you don't really believe you need it.
Well, I imagine them to be in some sacred temple in the Far East.
Oh, all right.
Written on manuscripts.
All right. Then why not join them and write your own manuscript? And that will be your permission slip. Yes?
Of course.
Well, that was easy, yes?
It's always easy.
Yes. There you go. So write your story out in manuscript form if that's what it takes to represent that energy for you. If that's what it takes to resonate within your story, join them. in what you imagine they're doing archetypally and become one of them and do what they do. Remember that by mirroring what you imagine is representative of that reality, you will then be expressing through physical action the vibrations of that reality. You will be a being in that reality, and thus then the things that are germane to that reality. Can
you define that a little? Germane, I don't really understand that.
Relevant.
All right.
But there was another connotation that you may discover later.
Yeah, because I noticed you broke it down in a very
Yes, I did.
particular way.
But that's going to be one of those funny little clues in your story that you're going to have to become a detective to discover.
A detection story, I love that.
All right. So go to your temple, write your manuscript, become a detective. You will see.
Yes, and I am doing my best to...
I know.
All right.
That's all you need to do.
Thank you,
Thank you.
teacher. We love you.
Our unconditional love to you as well.
Honey, I've been looking forward to speaking with you in this moment.
All right. And through what story will you be doing so?
Well, it's going to start with a Father's Day story.
Father's
And
Day story.
Yes, because it is Father's Day on Earth.
Yes, we
And
understand.
I was wondering, do you guys have those days?
No.
No, you don't.
Every day.
Every day is a celebration.
Yes.
Okay.
We do not delineate the idea of special days in that way specifically.
In what way do you?
We don't.
You just don't.
There are recognitions of certain things that happened in what you would call our history that are noted for their particular vibrational resonance, but we don't surround them with the kinds of rituals that you do. We simply experience that vibration and move forward.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to express that since we're talking about stories, I wanted to share with you how my dad would say that. He'd say,
All right.
I'd tell you a story. Because he likes pirate stuff, so he would say that. So I just wanted to share that with you. And my story actually starts a bit with my dad.
Yes.
We just saw the movie Thor.
Oh, all right.
And it was, I didn't really want to see it at first, but he's like, no, you really will love seeing this movie. You got to see it.
And did you?
I did, and I was exhilarated. And if you
Why?
guys, because I saw these different beings.
Yes.
in the galaxy, other races. And I felt such a connection to them. And I wish I was there with them, acting
all
out
right.
the different...
Does that mean you're also going to go see the latest movie entertainment that also deals with other beings in the galaxy?
There's one that I do plan to go see. It's the...
Is it the color green?
Green Lantern,
All
yes.
right.
And I did have a question about that.
Yes.
There's been talk that, as open contact becomes more open,
Yes.
that society will start showing more of what other races look like. Is that right? Not right, but
Do you mean will your depictions in your science fiction stories become more accurately representative of
Yes.
some of the races that exist?
yes.
Yes.
Okay. And does that movie reflect that?
Some.
Okay.
Now, again, remember, anything you can imagine is real because you cannot
Right.
imagine non-existence. But when I say some, I mean some that are relevant to anything that you could experience as being somewhat similar to your understanding of reality. All of them
Okay.
are real in their own context, but may not be relevant to your dimension of experience. But some actually are.
Okay. Thank you. So when I was watching the movie Thor, I felt like I wanted to be there, and I was kind of meditating on that later on after the movie, and my inner guidance told me, because I was asking, well, why am I not there if
You
I
are.
like it so much?
You are. You are not, but you
Right.
are.
Right. And I received that. Well, that is part of you. That is
Yes,
you. And
that's why you resonate to it.
Right. And you're on Earth to bring that here
Yes.
as an emanation.
Yes.
So I
you're the
was-
conduit. You're the valve
Yeah.
through which you can bring that energy down to earth and give off a vibration that will allow choices to be made that are in alignment with that frequency.
Yes. So I was very happy.
That's
with
why you have these kinds of stories. That's why one of the most powerful storytelling tools you have is movies. because it really gives you an interactive experience. And what you call theme parks. It gives you an interactive experience of story. And thus it sinks in because you're actually viscerally there in the vibration and together, unified in many ways.
I feel that a lot. And
Yes.
the next
Now,
part of
we
the
wish
story,
to also point out a very interesting polarity happening at this time with respect to these kinds of stories that involve what you call extraterrestrial beings. Because in this moment right now, you actually have presented at the same time a completely polarized idea of this notion in your entertainment. You have the idea we have just discussed of a story that involves the idea of what you would call an interstellar peacekeeping corps of extraterrestrials. And at the same time, you are also premiering
the Transformers movie.
that and also another one called
Cowboy.
Falling Skies, where your world is dominated by extraterrestrials on your television
I did see
sets. So you have presented the polarity for yourself so that you can explore and play with the idea of both sides simultaneously. You're bringing these creations closer and closer and closer to the center point so that you can really experience the balance of the dark and the light, the balance of the negative and the positive, and really decide what you prefer by exploring these stories so close to each other, on top of each other even. Good timing.
Yeah. Thank you for expanding on that. I remember the first time I heard you speak of the EIL, the Shalanaya.
Yes.
And all the senses in my being just perked up.
All right.
And I got goosebumps.
They are part of your story.
Yes,
you are
they
part of theirs.
are. They are. And I have...
They are one of the other hybrid races, the first one that will contact your world for those asking the question in their minds, what's the Shalanaya?
And I got goosebumps, and I never get goosebumps that I remember except for when I'm cold. And so I thought, I always heard people talk about getting goosebumps, but I've never got them. And then so when I got them, I was like,
well,
whoa.
now I can't say that anymore.
I know, right? I can't say that anymore. And I was like, wow, that is true. And as I listened to it,
yes.
the goosebumps they were like waves. They just continued to like electrify me.
Yes.
And
you understand fundamentally what that effect is you call goosebumps?
I don't know.
The idea is that they will be constrictions around the hair follicles that will allow the hair follicles to rise up and become more receptive antennas to that energy.
Oh, wow. That's neat.
Yes.
Thank you for expanding on that. And so as I continued to listen to that, I just closed my eyes and I got a sense as if I was there with them. Even now, like I feel like I can tap into them.
Yes,
and there's been certain occurrences and instances, one is being all of the month of May, I saw these clouds over Mount Baldy, that's close to where I live, that I've never seen like that ever before. They look like the ones on Mount Shasta.
Yes.
And they were over Mount Baldy, the range, and the whole month of May. I haven't seen them June, but I just thought, wow, that is so amazing. I felt like that was their presence showing themselves.
Well, in a
here.
sense, it is more the idea of your collective consciousness creating symbolic representations of what you are becoming more and more aware of, and in a sense, preparing yourselves for something more solid. You're using your own weather, you're using your own clouds to create shapes to represent what you will actually ultimately see in physical form.
Okay.
You're preparing yourselves
and I
for
felt,
contact with those forms. They're like placeholders.
And
because you are changing your weather.
right. I was wondering if you could tell a bit of a story of maybe some of the things you know that the Shalanaya or the IL would like for us to know at this time where we're at on Earth, and how we can be more open to
All
them.
right.
And how...
Water is very important. The more you allow yourself to allow crystallization, purification, higher resonance energies to, in that sense, interact with the structure of the water that you drink, the more you will aid and assist in the clarification of your bodily systems and the increasing of the silicon in your systems to make you more receptive to our frequencies, more receptive to our communications, so that you may receive those communications in the beginning of dialogues that will lay down the foundations and lay down the paths of our eventual contact. Water is key.
Thank you.
That is the message from them.
I heard them. Thank you. I was wondering if you could share some knowledge on the different visuals of some of our extraterrestrial races, such as the Pleiadians, the Arcturians, the Sirians, and the Argarthians. Do they look similar?
Pleiadians, in that sense, are genetically connected to you. You are like long-lost cousins. So in that sense, they are very humaniform. The idea of the physical race in the star system of Sirius is that which has been described as somewhat amphibious, in that sense, somewhat salamanderish. The idea of the non-physical consciousness connected to Sirius is, of course, non-physical. The idea of Arcturus energy in that sense is also a non-physical consciousness that does not have form in the way you would understand it, but is represented by the idea of the glowing orange orbs that many of you have seen.
Oh, okay.
What you are referring to as a Garthan in that sense is actually known by another frequency altogether that is very ancient, and they do not share the idea of physical form as you know it. There are other races that you will encounter eventually in time that are not like your species at all. We have from time to time described some of these. We will not really go into the list right now, but will at what you call a future time focus on the idea of a transmission that describes many of these races.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the sharing of your story.
Thank you. I have some more, if that's okay. It's
Your
okay.
story has an epilogue.
Yes, yes.
Make it brief.
Okay. I have heard you speak of the span between 2010 and 2015 and the sensing of energy at that moment.
Yes, the splitting prism.
And can you speak a little more on the splitting prism and where the energy on Earth is at this sensing of the energy?
The trains are already leaving the station. The tracks are getting slightly farther and farther apart. Be on the train you wish to be on before you can never reach the other track.
Right.
That's all we will say for now.
Okay.
Take everything we have said in the transmission over the course of what you call these 3 days and apply it to decide and choose what story you will be, what track you will be on.
Thank you. I am.
All right. Thank you. Tell us a story.
Well, first I want to say that I'm very grateful to have this opportunity to speak with you again today.
As are we.
So I'm really excited about this story.
All right.
It happened to me about 3 months ago. I had a dream.
Yes.
And I was in a temple with these, they look like humans, but I think later I figured out that they weren't.
All right.
And I had a really heart-opening experience. And through the heart-opening experience, I woke up. And at the edge of my bed, there was a being at the foot of my bed. And he
Describe.
his head was down at first, and he looked up at me. And his head was bigger on top.
Yes.
His eyes were bigger, but had pupils.
Yes.
They weren't fully black.
Yes.
The nose was small, and
Yes.
so was the mouth. It had like a slit, no lips. His skin appeared glowing green,
All right.
and it seemed like
One
he was...
moment.
Okay.
We are all laughing. All right, go ahead.
What?
Somebody was using humor and playing a little bit of a trick on you.
Okay.
But go ahead.
And he was wearing kind of like a red cape thing behind him.
One moment.
Okay.
All right.
Okay,
we know who this is. They like to play games and present themselves in certain ways to sort of startle you, wake you up. Kind of like what you call archetypally trickster energy.
But he seemed really compassionate
yes.
as well.
Oh, yes. There is nothing negative about this. Just playing with you.
And
Giving you a presentation knowing that when you describe this being, people will laugh. They will think you're seeing things.
Well, that's why I don't say this to many.
Well, you've just said it to a lot.
I don't.
But that's all right because they know they're all crazy too.
So, can you tell me a little bit more about who this particular being was, other than the trickster kind of archetype?
It is a being, a hybrid being, using the trickster archetype to communicate to your world and set up certain foundations for future communication with the hybrid children. But it is, in a sense, well, I'm going to put it this way. You understand in what you call Native American societies that the concept of what you call the clown is a little bit different than it is in your culture. The clown is a teacher, a trickster. What in certain native tongues is called a contrary, a heyoka. The clown, as a contrary, often does things that are very strange, dresses up very strangely, does things backwards, in reverse. It shakes people out of their normal, conventional view. And that's the idea that this being is doing. It is presenting itself as a type of contrary, a type of clown, to lighten the mood, to shake things up, to give you something unexpected. There are beings that do this, that specifically do this kind of contact in this way to shake the foundations of your expectations within your consciousness, to actually open doors within your consciousness to be capable of then receiving other things that, had the doors been closed, you would not have been able to perceive. But by giving you something so strange, so surreal, it actually allows you to open doors to receive other things you otherwise would not have been capable of perceiving. Yes, we know who that is. He's
coming to me with a clown suit on with a pig head on before.
Well, there you go, you see?
So I understand.
Yes.
So is this someone... What was funny is because I used to be very scared when I woke up and I would see something.
Yes.
And this time I wasn't.
Yes.
So I guess maybe he was coming to me in this way so I wouldn't be scared.
Coming to you in that way as a representation that you are no longer scared.
Okay.
It's a reflection of the fact that you've changed your story about your relationship to him and to other things.
And how can I further this relationship and this communication with this being?
One moment, we are laughing. Because we're getting the suggestion directly from him. Dress just like him. So that when you wake up in the same kind of cape, in the same kind of clown outfit, you can share a laugh as equals.
Okay.
You asked.
Well, that's very funny, and I like that a lot.
All right, up to you.
Great, and I have one more question.
Yes.
So it's kind of going off the questions that the woman was asking before. Is the representation of our consciousness coming out as the stories that there are many alien movies coming out right now?
Yes.
So is it our growing consciousness that is allowing this to happen?
Yes. The things that happen in your culture are direct reflections of what you are exploring in your consciousness. And now that you have more and more willingness to recognize that you're not alone, that there are other extraterrestrial races, or at least willing to accept that there could be, you're beginning to explore within your consciousness all the ways that you can develop relationships on that level with other civilizations. So this is being reflected and has been reflected in your consciousness and in your culture now for quite some time.
And these movies are kind of awakening just all of us.
They are reflections of the fact you are awakening.
Oh, okay.
They're not awakening you, but they're reinforcements of the awakening. If you hadn't already awakened to that point, you wouldn't be creating those movies. You understand?
Yes.
All right.
Okay. Thank you.
Does
Bashar.
that help you?
Yes, it does very much so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good day, Bashar.
And to you, good day. What is your story?
It's not so much about my story, but I want to ask about your story and the Essassani story a little bit more.
All right. What do you wish to know about our story?
First of all, how do you say good day in your ancient Essassani language?
Again, it is very similar to the idea. Do you have a word on your planet in one of your languages, the word aloha, yes?
Yes.
It means many things. So does ha'atu.
I see.
Ha'atu means thank you.
Thank
it
you in
means
Hawaiian.
I love you. It means good day. It means many things. Ha'atu is simply the greeting.
I see.
You understand?
Yes.
All right.
Thank you.
Anything else?
So your people, geez, where do I start? Okay, so
Most stories start at the beginning.
if I were to be on your planet right now, you
Yes.
said it's very quiet, right?
Well, yes, in the sense that there are no conversations usually because we do not verbalize.
Sure. Would you be able to telepathically communicate with humans back and forth, or
Who are on our world?
Yes.
If
for
they
example.
acclimate to our frequency, yes.
Oh, I see.
If they don't, we would probably have to vocalize.
I see. Without a channel, there might be a language barrier. I would think, huh?
Well, many of us have learned many of your languages. Understand that our language is a hybrid language. Our ancient language was actually constructed out of many of the languages on your planet and other civilizations. So you would actually recognize a lot of it.
Really?
And we can simply adapt to understand because many of us, out of our own excitement, have learned many of your languages.
Oh, that's fascinating. Thank you for taking interest.
Well, that is simply what we're excited to do.
And so you said that when your civilization was starting off, you were
Yes.
given a kind of a database of information
Yes.
from the Greys or the
Yes.
creators. What kind of things did that contain that gave you kind of a jump start to? have
Well, a complete
success?
and basic understanding of the idea of our psychological makeup. So that we would understand the idea of what belief systems were all about, what emotions were all about, what our personalities were all about. We were still left to explore some ideas of this, but we understood from what you call the get-go that fear was a choice.
I see.
So we did not really experience what you would call the concept really of conflict on our world. Conflict simply being, if you wish, negotiation with teeth.
I see.
Negotiation based on fear.
And what is the Essassani or Sassani people's relationship to the other hybrid races? Do you communicate frequently?
We do, not necessarily frequently with all of them in terms of your time. 4 of them are quite constant. One of them has chosen to be relatively isolated in its exploration of itself.
I see. The Shalanaya, who are supposedly the first to contact us, they are the ones who had the Phoenix Light ship. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. I just want to send an invitation to them to come back. And,
Invitations have already been sent. You need send no more.
okay.
They will always answer the invitations in the timing that is appropriate.
And the other thing is a being known as Kayala, who I have asked about previously once, is of which hybrid race?
Partly Shalanaya, partly the 3rd hybrid race.
Does that 3rd hybrid race have a name that is able to be disclosed, or no?
That story is for another time.
Okay. May I just extend to that being a thank you for being willing to undergo the type of interaction that he did with the people of our planet, and we must seem a little bit primitive. And
You are masters. You understand the idea is that it takes a master to choose a reality of such great polarity. We understand what you mean by primitive, but that's just an expression. The idea is that once you realize your mastery, you will not see yourselves as primitives either.
I see. Just wanted to relay that message that it does not go unappreciated.
All right.
What has been done. So
That is
thank you.
understood and reciprocated, and gratitude is given.
Okay, that is all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ha'atu.
At this timing, the story must move to another chapter. Take a short break. We will resume this story transmission with the idea of the experience of your holotope.
How are you all? All right. First of all, once again, thank you for the co-creation of the interaction and the allowance of the transmission to occur in this way and on this day. Each and every time you allow us to experience each and every one of you, by interacting with us, we get to experience more and more of the facets of the multidimensional crystal of creation, and this to us is a gift. So we thank you for your gift and willingness to share. We will begin this transmission with what we have titled it, Angels and Demons. Ooh, scary. But not really. Let us proceed in the following way. Now, we understand that you have a great degree of literature, a great degree of stories, great degree of mythology surrounding the idea of angels, demons, what you consider them to be. But there is a completely different perspective that we would like to introduce to you this day of your time. And that perspective begins from the point of view of all that is, what you might call God, Goddess, Creator. Doesn't matter what the title is, but from that point of view, it takes on a completely different quality, completely different idea, and a completely different expression and experience of this concept that you call the angels and the demons. Before we proceed with that particular point of view, however, we would like to point out that while this is not always the case, in much of the literature, what might be your religious texts, and so on and so forth, that have been handed down to you through history, through the ages, the mentions of so-called angels and so-called demons have more often than not simply been representations of different types of extraterrestrial beings, rather than classically what you might consider to be literally an angelic consciousness or a demonic one. It is simply that in that day and age, in those times, when the people on your planet really didn't have other ways of describing what they were experiencing, they simply lumped into the whole angelic demonic realm or notion the idea of the different kinds of extraterrestrials they may have encountered that were visiting your world and interacting with the people on your planet here and there from time to time. So just understand, and we simply get this idea out of the way up front, that many of the stories that have to do with angels and demons really have to do with beings such as myself and other kinds of extraterrestrial beings that were interacting with your species for many, many millennia. But from the other point of view, from the higher point of view, let us now proceed to point out and to remind you that all that is, by definition, must contain both the positive energies and the negative energies. And the more you expand your consciousness, the more you will actually come into a recognition and awareness of both the positive and the negative. Because if you're expanding to have a higher point of view, you're going to be seeing more closely from the point of view of creation itself, and you're going to be seeing more of the negative as well as the positive. Now, this does not mean that you have to experience what you are observing in a negative sense, but you will become more aware of more of its existence, because as you expand and become more your version of all that is, you cannot shut out, you cannot deny the totality of all that is. But because it is a totality, and as you expand in your awareness of both the positive energies and the negative ones, you will also come to understand that creation is not just a duality or a polarity, but a trinity. For always, always, always in the center will be the balance point. And that balance point between the two polarized views will form the third perspective, the trinity perspective, that will allow you to allow the positive and the negative to exist in a state of balance, so that you can neutrally observe both sides and then actively choose to experience what you prefer to experience without invalidating what you no longer prefer to experience. There's a very, very big difference between forming a value judgment as opposed to simply preferring something as a representation of who and what you are as an energy, as a consciousness, as a frequency, as a vibration. Whatever your natural core being is has a certain frequency, and the things that align with it, the things that you prefer to be, that are really truly you, do not invalidate the things you don't prefer. You leave room, you allow room for all aspects and all reflections of creation to exist, because without one side, the other could not exist. It must be taken as a whole. But again, that doesn't mean you have to experience certain effects that are not in alignment with what you prefer to experience based on who you allow yourself to know you truly are. Nevertheless, let us proceed with the idea of the expression of angels and demons. Now, we have talked about the idea that first and foremost there is what you might call in existence simply the One. Now, the One, which is everything but homogeneous, because it is homogeneous, there is no reflection of the other to compare itself to. Therefore, the One has absolutely no experience of itself, no awareness of itself whatsoever. It just is the isness that is. But there is an aspect of the One that we call the all that is, and that is the aspect of the One that is aware of itself as the One, that is aware of itself as everything within existence. That's how we make that differentiation for the sake of clarity. The One is unaware of itself, but the all that is aware that it is all that is. However, the idea of recognizing that all that is all that is requires, as we just said, a reflection. In order for something to recognize what it is, there must be the comparison, there must be the reflection of what it is not, so that it can know itself by contrast. Thus, the first reflection, the first recognition, the first level of awareness that all that is has of its own existence as an actual being, as an actual consciousness, as all that is, that first level is what you call angelic, demonic consciousness. That's the first split. That's the first reflection in the mirror of existence itself. Being that all forms of consciousness have autonomy, because everything is made of consciousness and everything in its own way is self-aware, when you start reflecting, every single reflection has self-awareness. Now, it may not be the self-awareness that you experience as physical beings, but nevertheless, it is a type of self-awareness. There has to be that reflectivity. There has to be that awareness of self in some way, shape, or form for there to be an expression of a thing made out of the consciousness of existence itself. So the first level of awareness that all that is has of itself is the idea that it is the balanced state of everything, the balanced state, the trinity that includes the polarities of positive, negative, and the balance point in the middle. So the perspective of all that is of itself as all of that is a balanced one. However, the next stage of that, where comes into play the idea of the angels and demon expression of all that is as consciousness, is that by definition it is a polarized one. So the angels and the demons, as you call them in your language, are actually the first level of self-awareness that all that is has of itself just as the polarity and not as the trinity. Is this making sense so far? The idea is that it contains the vibration we call mechanically positive, which is not a value judgment. Positive, negative are not value judgments. It's just the idea that something is either integrative, collective, expansive, connective. That's the positive mechanical energy. Or negative, segregative, disconnective, contracting as opposed to expanding. This is the negative mechanism. Now, again, the all that is understands the balance point between the two and understands itself to be that balance point between the two as well as the polarities. But the angels and demons are the idea of the polarity on its first level of pure expression as a duality, as a polarity. Now, in your ancient texts, again, in your mythologies of angels and demons, you have captured the essential idea of this by recognizing in your stories that the so-called demons are, quote-unquote, fallen angels. So you're still recognizing the angelic aspect to them, but you also recognize that they are functioning more from a reflection of negative energy rather than positive energy, which is what you describe and ascribe to the idea of the angelic realm. So really, in essence, what you're really dealing with is that first bubble of all that is both polarities, experiencing itself in a polarized way as the positive reflection that you call angelic, and as the shadow reflection, the negative energy reflection, you call demonic. But these are essentially just terms. The idea really is that you are dealing with the same being, but the polarity of that being. And the way that it represents itself in your stories is as you need to express it to simply relate to it through the idea of something that seems somewhat humanoid. The idea of the true angels and the true demons are really, in a sense, non-physical. They can never really materialize physically in the way that you think of yourselves materializing physically, because they operate on energy levels that are far away above and beyond the concept of the physical material vibration. Nevertheless, they can, in a sense, imprint themselves or present themselves in the same way, or by analogy, that you might imagine you might have a sheet of rubber in front of you, and an angel or a demon can, in a sense, extend its hand, this is a metaphor, into the sheet of rubber so you can see the impression of it that you would consider to be its physical representation, but you're actually not really seeing the actual being, you're just seeing how it imposes itself in the material of your particular reality domain, of your particular dimension, which seems solid to you. So they can be visualized, they can be sensed, but you're never actually seeing the real being itself. You're only seeing a representation as best as they can stretch their hand into the rubber membrane, but they can never actually break through in the same way. The idea, therefore, of interaction between you has to be by agreement. You have to align with the vibration that they give off and create a representation in your reality out of your energy, your consciousness, and your material in order for you to create a projectional representation of having an interaction with that level of consciousness, be it angelic or be it demonic, the shadow side of the angels. This tells you right up front that you are never capable of being really directly influenced by nor controlled by these energies, because you are not actually in direct contact in your physical reality. You have to create an agreement between you to vibrate in accord to the frequency they give off in order to have any experience of interaction with them at all. And thus, when you agree to do so, you create by the same agreement a projection from your own consciousness that materializes something for you so that you can have a physical experience of interacting with something that you actually are having no direct interaction with. Not in that way physically anyway. Energetically, yes, but not directly physically. Now, the idea also of this whole analogy of the demons simply being the shadow side of angels is also represented in your mythologies and in your stories, in your presentations, by the idea of how you name these things and how you order these so-called hierarchies. And in a moment you will see that there is a very direct analogy to the idea you call the yin-yang symbol in this presentation. Just as your yin-yang symbol expresses the idea of polarities by having one dark side and one light side, and yet in the darkness, there is always going to be a light circle, and in the light, there will always be the dark circle. This lets you know as a symbol that no matter what you vibrate with, there is always the freedom to choose to go through the doorway to the other side. You are never left without freedom to choose. And the yin-yang symbol is a perfect representation of the Trinity in the sense that you have the light and the dark, and access points to the dark and the light from each side that can cross over, and the line in between the two is the balance point between them that represents the Trinity. But how this is represented in your mythologies and your stories and your representations of angels and demons, this yin-yang symbol and the ability to access either side from either side, is in how you have structured this idea of these beings in this hierarchical fashion. So you recognize in your story the idea of the king of the demons, what you call Lucifer. And you know in your stories that Lucifer is, as again you say, a fallen angel, but that you know his name means light bearer, bearer of light. Now, the idea, therefore, is that's the representation right there, that even though he represents the mechanical negativity vibration, you still know by allowing that name to remain that he is capable of being a doorway through which you can use negative energy to still find your way to the light if you allow yourself to use that vibration and form the relationship in an appropriate way. And on the other side, you have the idea of what you call the angel Gabriel, which in your stories is supposed to blow the trumpet in the day of judgment, which causes a little bit of fear in a lot of you. And therefore you have the representation on the positive side of the idea of maybe being judged in a negative way. And so you see the yin-yang symbol superimposed even upon the angelic and demonic realm by knowing that no matter how light it is, no matter how dark it is, you always have access. You always have some symbolic vibrational representation that allows you to access the other side and make a choice through your freedom and your power to choose. Is this making sense to you? All right. So, by beginning to recognize this bubble, this reflective sphere of all that is not the one, that is not the all that is, that recognizes itself from a balanced point of view, but is the first bubble, the first energy sphere, the first sphere of consciousness that is actually playing out the duality, then you can see that as the spheres go down and down and down and down into the idea of crystallization into physical reality, that issue, that experience of polarity goes with it and becomes denser, 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 and denser and denser. So that when you then experience the idea of your consciousness as a projection you call a physical life, a physical incarnation, you're going to be dealing with the densest possible level of the vibration of that polarity and that trinity. So the idea then is that when you experience that density of polarity, you're going to find yourself coming up against those ideas, those definitions, and those beliefs that are aligned mechanically with positive energy or aligned mechanically with negative energy in very visceral ways, so that you do make it seem as if you are dealing with beings that are so powerful, these angelic and demonic beings, but all you're actually dealing with is a reflection of your own energy on this level, represented to you by those who are the ambassadors of each respective positive or negative energy. That aspect of the angelic realm, the demonic realm, that act as the first ambassadors of polarity. And on your level being so crystallized, so densified, you are dealing with the most dense version of those ideas, and so you experience those things in the most visceral way you possibly can. Does that make sense? And that's why it's so easy for you to buy into great joy and great fear in that way. It almost seems as if there's no real neutrality in your reality. But that is the key. That is the place to be. That is where you come from. That is where you experience your projections in both directions of the positive and the negative, and find yourself having whatever experiences are based on what you believe to be true. Because as has been pointed out many times, belief systems are designed to perpetuate themselves and make it seem that no other belief is possible. So if you're dealing with positive energy, you have very, very powerful experiences of reality and nature and beings and consciousness reflecting to you the solidity, the truth of that idea of the positive side of creation and all that is. But if you're dealing with negative beliefs, you get just as strong an array of presentations of the visceral, solid nature of the so-called beings that are the representations of that negativity. But all you're really dealing with directly are the reflections of the negative beliefs and fear-based beliefs within yourself, or the reflections of the positive beliefs and the joy-based beliefs within yourself. And in knowing that these projections come from you at the center, by bringing those things back in and creating more and more neutrality and more blending, you will achieve more balance with these ideas. You will not fear the negative, and you will allow yourself to not charge that energy so strongly for yourselves, and you will allow yourselves to see that you are free to choose, and you will allow yourselves to experience far more balance in your lives, which will give you a much better opportunity to sense the balance that all that is experiences itself to be, and start aligning more and more with the energy of all that is on that level, so that no matter what happens in your life, no matter how it may have initially been generated, you will always have the opportunity to transmute everything into the vibrational energy that you prefer to, by coming from that place of neutralization, so that all things are balanced, so that the scales are even, and without invalidating what you don't prefer, you gain the ability and the power that you've always had more consciously to choose what you do prefer. Does this make sense to you? All right. So anytime you hear of anyone or looking at any piece of literature that talks about a run-in with an angel or a demon, start coming from a more modern definition of these things. Let go of the old-fashioned, outdated, medieval, fear-based definitions, and start bringing your definitions into a more streamlined format that is more representative and more appropriate for what you have called on your planet the modern age, your 21st century. And allow yourselves to truly understand the mechanism behind these things. For yes, you are dealing with consciousness, but the only consciousness there is to deal with is the consciousness of the creation itself, of existence itself. And yes, all forms and expressions of consciousness, as we said, are autonomous and have their own self-awareness, but that in no way, shape, or form means you are ever controlled by these things if you prefer not to play by those particular rules. It's always in your hands. It's always up to you what you are aligned with, and there is no need to fear any of those things, for they are there for you to illuminate what needs to be illuminated in the way that you prefer. For remember, it's much, much easier to see a candle flame when it's surrounded by darkness. So the darkness serves you to see the light, even as the light creates shadows and puts you in touch with the idea of the darkness. And round, like the yin-yang symbol, you go, creating cycles and cycles and cycles of experience of polarity, and neutralizing, and always coming back to zero, and creating again a new cycle of polarity, and neutralizing, and coming back to zero, and yet again creating another cycle of polarity over and over and over again, because this is the definition of the process by which you discover yourselves from a new point of view, by always expanding into polarity and drawing yourself back into the neutral space to gather the information from the experience you had of the polarity, and then expanding yourself again in a new direction and experiencing polarity from a new point of view and gathering yourself back together again and constantly going through this expansion and contraction. And this is one of the reasons that we have called the upcoming event the idea of 2015 to 2016, the years of expansion and contraction, because this experience of expansion and contraction and dealing with positive and negative energies will accelerate and will amplify and will magnify. And it is to your own advantage to understand that this is a natural cycle, so that going with the flow will allow you to take advantage of this cycle of breathing in and out, and reinvent yourself anew, every time you go back to the 0 point and expand and allow yourself to go up in frequency and up in frequency and up in frequency, so that you can begin to see going back and forth between these polarities, not as this, but as this. Always rising, even while descending, so that you know that you are aligning more and more with your true nature and allowing yourself to experience life in all its forms in the way that is most truly representative of your core vibration. You all have a little angel and a little demon in you. Allow yourselves to come to terms and be at peace with the reflections that you see. For the devils are only there to show you the devil inside, so that you can decide for yourselves if that's what you truly wish to align with. And the angels are there to encourage you to look at all aspects of yourself from a place of power. Neither side denies the existence of the other. Both sides work in concert to bring you into balance. So work with those polarities in a positive way from the energy state that you prefer, being in balance, in a neutral state, which is actually, as we have said, always slightly positive, because a balanced state allows you to choose freely what you prefer. Therefore, you could say creation is perhaps just ever so slightly more positive than negative in its construction. So if you simply allow yourself to go back into a neutral state, the eddies and currents of the natural flow of creation, even if you then do nothing, will very, very, very slowly start pulling you in the direction of the positive cycle and give you more and more ability to decide more freely who it is you are and how it is you prefer to express your being. Always remember, when you're dealing with the negative side, that you always have the key to find the light within yourself. And always, always, always remember and remind yourself that when you're experiencing the positive side, you are always still free to choose the darkness. That way you know you are truly supported unconditionally by creation, because it's all a part of creation, and you are allowed with your free will to decide what way to express the unique aspect of creation you have been created to be. Does this make sense to you? All right. Well, now, my little angels and devils, we can, if you wish, at this time, begin the interaction of questions. Proceed however you wish. As you arrange yourselves, we will remind you that this is just the beginning of this conversation about angels and demons and these energies that we are speaking of here today. There will be more in the future after you have absorbed and truly allow yourself to understand and make your own what has already been said here today. This is just the beginning. It's just the first page of a book with many chapters. More to come.